The movie is about these folks from the Chung Chao gang over in Thailand, and they're taking girls into a building for a not-so-nice job. After that, they hop on their bikes, not knowing that there's a bald guy watching them from across the street. Turns out this bald dude is Curdy Church, an American hitman. He got hired to take out the Chung Chao gang members, but his client doesn't want it to look like Curdy did it. Nope, the plan is to make it seem like the Jong-un gang, the rival of the Chung Chao gang, did the dirty work. They want to stir up trouble between these two gangs. So Curdy rolls a grenade towards the gang members and boom, they're all gone in a flash. Then he grabs someone from the Jong-un gang, who he had snatched earlier, and sticks a gun in the guy's hand. This way, the Chung Chao gang will think it was the Jong-un dude who did the job. Mission accomplished for Curdy, but he knows he's got to get out of there pronto. Just when he's about to split, he spots a lady who saw the whole thing. He doesn't say a word to her because he's got to make a run for it before the cops show up. So in the next part of the story, we meet the head honcho of the Chung Chao gang, Advisor Brune. He's pretty upset because he heard that the Jong-un gang used a bomb to kill some of his guys. Advisor Brune's got fire in his belly, and he orders his crew to hit back at the Jong-un gang at midnight as payback for the bomb attack. Meanwhile, our man Curdy goes to see his client, Ratchadont, to collect his cash. Turns out, Ratchadont's got a serious bone to pick with these nasty gangs because they kidnapped and killed his daughter. Basically, he's out for revenge. Ratchadont asks Curdy to take out a few more fellas from the Chung Chao gang, and he's willing to pay big bucks if Curdy gets the job done. Curdy says yes to the gig, but he needs a new weapon. So he heads over to a club run by an arms dealer named Jimmy the Brit. This Jimmy guy is a real pro when it comes to making weapons. But Jimmy isn't too thrilled to see Curdy. The moment he spots him in the club, Jimmy bolts out onto the street, leaving Curdy no choice but to chase him down. Curdy chased down Jimmy and tried to calm him down. He told Jimmy not to be scared because he was just there to buy a weapon. Jimmy felt a huge relief when he heard that. You see, Jimmy knew Curdy was an assassin and thought he was coming to kill him. If he knew Curdy just needed a weapon, he wouldn't have run. After that, Jimmy took Curdy to his stash of weapons, and Curdy picked a sniper rifle. Now, armed with his new gear, Curdy snuck into a temple tower for his next mission. This tower was right across from the club owned by the Jong-un gang. Curdy believed that the Chung Chao gang would attack the club to get back at them for the bombing. So he waited in the tower, getting ready. He hid Ratchadont's money on the floor and removed one of the stairs, just in case someone tried to come up while he was busy. Then he set up his rifle by the window and enjoyed his dinner. As Curdy was digging into his meal, out of nowhere, a woman appeared in the tower, catching him off guard. Turns out it was the same woman he'd spotted when he took down those gang members. Her name was May, and she said she'd been secretly following Curdy because she wanted to help him. But Curdy had his doubts and didn't buy her story. He tied her up and silenced her because he was worried she might mess up his plan. But as time passed, Curdy kinda warmed up to May. He decided to untie her and asked her to give him a heads up if she heard anything funny happening at the club. Before long, the Chung Chao gang showed up in front of the club and a big old shootout kicked off. May woke Curdy in a hurry, and he grabbed his long rifle ready to join the fight. But this got May all jumpy because it was her first time seeing someone shoot and kill another person. The next day, Advisor Brune went to see the big boss, Boss Katha, to tell him about the shooting spree that happened last night, where their gang members got killed by a sniper. Advisor Brune didn't think this sniper was from their rivals, the Jong-un gang. Now this sniper was making his way over to the gang's HQ. Curdy got the scoop from May, who'd been a captive of the Chung Chao gang before and wanted to help Curdy take them down. Curdy agreed and asked her to lead him to the Chung Chao gang's base. But when they got there, Curdy was in for a shock. The gang's HQ was massive, with guards patrolling all over the place. Looking at that place, Curdy realized that Chung Chao gang wasn't the small-time crew that Ratchadont had described. Later that same night, Curdy tracked down Ratchadont to have a chat. Even though he was a bit annoyed that Ratchadont kept giving him risky jobs, Curdy was still up for doing hits as long as he got paid triple. Surprisingly, Ratchadont agreed to his request. Meanwhile, Boss Cuff-Thaw and Advisor Boone paid a visit to the Jong-Un gang's base to propose a truce. They figured out that the Jong-Un gang wasn't the ones behind the bombing that killed their folks. It seemed like someone or some group had been trying to pit the Chang-Keo and Jong-Un gangs against each other. To make amends and show they wanted peace, Boss Cuff-Thaw brought along a white elephant, a symbol of peace, and handed it over to the Jong-Un gang. Unbeknownst to them, Curdy and May were keeping an eye on the meeting from a distance, so now Curdy knew that the two gangs had called a truce. Well, even though Ratchadont had already given him a new mission, Curdy had to swing by Jimmy's place again to grab some more gear. But this time, Jimmy wasn't too keen on helping out. He figured out that Curdy was using his weapons to take down some big-shot gang members in the country. Jimmy didn't want the Chung Cho gang to find out he was the one supplying Curdy with weapons. But eventually, Jimmy caved in because Curdy kept pushing him. He took Curdy to his other stash, hidden inside a ship, and showed him a special weapon. Out of the blue, Curdy gave Jimmy a sharp elbow to the face, saying he was doing it on purpose to help him out. See, if the Chung Cho gang ever found out that Jimmy was giving Curdy weapons, Jimmy could claim that Curdy had robbed him. That scar on his face could be proof of it. Later that night, Curdy used his new sniper rifle to take down those gang members once again. He climbed up to the roof of a building across from Chang-Keo's headquarters and started picking them off one by one. But this time, an enemy sniper spotted his moves, and Curdy had to make a run for it, leaving his new weapon behind. He had to move fast because not only had he been injured by the enemy sniper's shot, but the gang had also figured out where he was. Lucky for him, there was a gang truck parked nearby, so he hopped in and drove off before they could surround him. But during the getaway, Curdy heard some noise from the back of the truck. He opened the rear door and, to his surprise, found May and another girl inside. Curdy soon learned that these girls were sex workers under the gang's control. He told them to get out of the truck, but they refused. They wanted to go back to the gang because they were addicted to drugs and could easily get their fix from them. Plus, they feared that if they ran away, the gang would find them and do them harm. Curdy decided to let the girls be and continued on with May. They caught a taxi and headed back to their hideout in the Temple Tower. During the ride, Curdy couldn't help but ask May why she had ended up in that truck in the first place. May simply said she wanted to rescue those girls, but couldn't pull it off. A little while later, they reached their destination. Since Curdy had been shot, May thought it was best to take him to the monks at the temple for immediate treatment. Meanwhile, the Chung Cho gang got their hands on the sniper rifle Curdy had been using, and they figured out it originally came from Jimmy. So, Advisor Boone had a chat with Jimmy to find out what happened. Jimmy, following Curdy's instructions, claimed that he'd been robbed and had lost a bunch of weapons. Advisor Boone believed him, but he still had his men keep an eye on Jimmy, just in case. So, a few days passed, and Curdy had healed up and was ready for action again. He took out some members of the Chung Cho gang who were keeping an eye on Jimmy's club, and he grabbed one of their phones. Curdy paid a visit to Jimmy and asked for a different kind of weaponry this time, the kind for close-up fighting. While they were on their way to get the weapons, Boss Cuff-Thaw called the cell phones of his guys, which were now in Curdy's pockets. Without any hesitation, Curdy picked up and told Boss Cuff-Thaw that he'd taken care of his men and was responsible for their deaths. He offered a deal. He'd stop the killing if Boss Cuff-Thaw would release all the girls he forced into sex work. But Boss Cuff-Thaw refused, explaining that he believed he was actually helping these girls. Some of their parents had sold them for money, and others were wandering the streets before he took them in. If he let them go, they wouldn't have anywhere to live. Curdy was stumped by Boss Cuff-Thaw's explanation. It didn't match what he'd heard from Ratchadont. According to Ratchadont, the Chung Cho gang had snatched the girls before forcing them into the world of sex work. After getting the weapons from Jimmy, Curdy decided to shadow Ratchadont to uncover the real story. He was taken aback when he saw Ratchadont entering a brothel, a place you wouldn't expect a grieving father to be. Still, Curdy needed answers, so he went into the brothel pretending to be a customer. Inside, he talked to one of the girls to find out who Ratchadont really was and where to find him. Surprisingly, the girl said that Ratchadont was actually the owner of the brothel, and he was upstairs. Without wasting a moment, Curdy headed upstairs to confront Ratchadont. But before he could get far, the girl yelled out, alerting the guards that Curdy was on his way to harm Ratchadont. In no time, the guards surrounded Curdy and started shooting at him, but they couldn't stop him. In the end, Curdy finds Ratchadont in a room and demands the truth from him. When Ratchadont realized there was no way out, he came clean to Curdy. He confessed that he was actually Boss Cuthaw's son. That whole story about the Chung Cheo gang kidnapping and killing his daughter was just a made-up tale to gain Curdy's sympathy. His real goal was to tarnish Advisor Boone's reputation, as he was in line to become the next leader of the gang after Boss Cuthaw. Ratchadont wanted to stop that from happening, because he believed he deserved to be his father's successor. To achieve this, he asked Curdy to take out Advisor Boone and promised a big reward if Curdy succeeded. After mulling it over for a bit, Curdy agreed to the deal. Meanwhile, the gang got their hands on Jimmy and put him through some rough interrogation once they learned of his involvement in recent events. The torture got to him, and Jimmy admitted that Curdy was the one behind the gang members' deaths, and that he'd supplied Curdy with the weapons. So, Jimmy's confession got in the hands of Boss Cuthaw and Advisor Boone, and they got right down to planning how to nab Curdy. Advisor Boone suggested getting some help from the corrupt police, but Ratchadont wasn't on board with that idea. He felt that relying on Advisor Boone wouldn't solve their problems. According to Ratchadont, the only person Boss Cuthaw could trust was him. Ratchadont's words convinced Boss Cuthaw, and he gave the green light for Ratchadont to track down and catch Curdy. Now Jimmy was still stuck at the Chung Cheo gang's club. He managed to convince the guards to let him use the restroom, and that's when he made a call to Curdy. He warned Curdy about the looming danger. Jimmy had spilled everything to the gang, including Curdy's identity, so Curdy had to get out of Thailand as soon as possible. So, Curdy liked the idea and told Jimmy to take May somewhere safe. He even promised Jimmy a big pile of cash if he could pull it off. Jimmy agreed, especially since he was on the verge of getting released by the gang. But Jimmy had actually been working with Ratchadont all along. The truth comes out in the next scene when Ratchadont meets Jimmy and asks him to bait Curdy into a trap. Ratchadont planned to take out Curdy and bring his head to Boss Cuthaw. He said if Jimmy refused, he wouldn't think twice about ending him. Meanwhile, Curdy headed back to the Temple Tower to bid farewell to May. He told her he was heading back to the United States. But May didn't need to worry because his buddy Jimmy was on his way to watch over her. Curdy then left some money with May, meant for Jimmy when he arrived. So, a little while later, Curdy was at the airport, all set to hop on a plane and leave Thailand. While he was waiting for his flight, he gave Jimmy a call to let him know he was at the airport and getting ready to go. But what he heard from Jimmy left him stunned. Jimmy told him that he did go to the Temple Tower, just like Curdy had said, but all he found there was the money Curdy had left. There was no woman named May there, not a soul in sight. Hearing this, Curdy started to get suspicious, thinking that Jimmy might have double-crossed him and teamed up with the gang to lure him out. Before long, some of the gang members showed up at the airport. Curdy managed to sneak up on their car, knocked out the driver, and took off with the car. He rushed back to the Temple Tower, but May was nowhere to be found. It got him thinking that maybe the gang had kidnapped her and taken her to their hideout. Without wasting a second, Curdy drove straight to the gang's hideout and rammed his way into the room where Boss Cuthaw and Advisor Boone were. He didn't beat around the bush. He aimed his gun at Boss Cuthaw and offered to buy all the girls Boss Cuthaw had forced into slavery. Surprisingly, Boss Cuthaw agreed, but he had one condition. Curdy had to spill the beans about who had sent him to attack the gang. Curdy decided to spill the beans and told Boss Cuthaw that his client was behind it all. He also revealed that Ratchadont wanted Advisor Boone dead. As luck would have it, Ratchadont was in the same room, and he was fuming mad that Curdy had blabbed about his plan. So, in a fit of anger, he shot Curdy. But thankfully, Jimmy showed up just in the nick of time and shot Ratchet Dot back. After Ratchet Dot was taken down, Boss Cuthaw ordered his guys to get the girls out of there. But there was one problem. May was nowhere to be found among the girls. This left Curdy puzzled. He asked them about May, but Boss Cuthaw and Advisor Boone insisted there was no one named May in their place. Curdy didn't buy it though. The gang had pictures of all their girls on the wall, and Curdy found a picture of May. He showed it to the boss, called him out for lying, and demanded they release May immediately. But Boss Cuthaw stuck to his story, claiming the girl's name was May, and that she had been with them for 30 years. According to him, she was long gone, no longer part of their operation. So, it dawned on Curdy that the May who had been with him in recent days must have been her spirit. Maybe she wanted to assist him in setting the other girls free from a life of prostitution. Surprisingly, May's wish came true at last. Boss Cuthaw got the money and invited Curdy and Jimmy to take all the girls with them. In the final scene, May's spirit appeared to Curdy once more. She had a big smile on her face, pleased that Curdy had succeeded in freeing the girls. And just like that, the movie comes to an end. So the moral of the story is never trust a guy named Jimmy twice, especially if he disappears faster than a magician's rabbit. And remember, sometimes the best partner you can have is a ghost with a mission.